you.
Let's take a short break now. When we come back, I'll be joined by the senior editor of the World Almanac to talk about the top trends in the news over the last year. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. The terror threat and the race for the White House have been two of the biggest stories of 2015, and both appear poised to dominate the news cycle as we head into the new year as well. Joining me now to talk about those stories and a lot more is Sarah Janssen. She is the senior editor of the World Almanac. Thank you for being here. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me.
I've never met anybody who had any involvement in any of this stuff, and it's nice to know that there are real people behind this stuff.
Absolutely. There are a lot of real people.
Well, Americans have this fascination, I do in particular, like everybody else, with like just collections of facts without the narrative. I spend all day trying to sort of fit things into narratives. This is just like a whole bunch of information.
Absolutely. It's a lot of information on a lot of different topics, everything from science and pop culture and sports to politics and history.
Yes, you know, I was just flipping through, and you mentioned to me right before we came on the air, I'm looking at the good old periodic table of elements. You say that it changes from time to time. I had no idea.
It changes, and we have to look into it. We have to make sure that we're confirming with the authoritative sources every year, making sure that we have that periodic table constantly up to date.
Sometimes, how do you do this? Do you break this down by subject area? How many people are working on this thing?
It's, you know, it is a huge process. It's definitely not just me. You've got about 20 different people. This is researchers and fact checkers, editors, writers, also some subject-specific experts like an astrophysicist, for example. He advises us on some of the more technical issues in the science sections. So there's a lot of people that come together to pick out the authoritative sources and what we think that readers are going to be really interested in seeing in black and white, the facts for the upcoming year.
Now, I thought Wikipedia was supposed to put you folks out of business, you know, where everybody can, you know, you get hundreds of millions of people all contributing information, and that it would undermine the basis for a commercial publication like this.
You know what? Ask any reference editor, any almanac editor, and they will tell you that they love Wikipedia because it is so much fun to get into. We're casual users of Wikipedia also, but we also acknowledge that there are a lot of sources out there, and that part of our job is to identify the authoritative ones and the ones that we think are most interesting and will be most useful to people who pick up the World Almanac.
Well, there's a lot of interesting stuff in here, and before we get to the news stuff, the world's most populous urban area, Tokyo, 38 million people. I would have guessed Mexico City, right, exactly.
It's up there for sure. And you know what, that's one of those other things that they change the projections on every year depending on all of these different demographic movements. Obviously, there are lots of migration issues going on. You see what's going on in Europe with 1 million refugees and migrants in 1 year. So these things are constantly changing, and the World Almanac is keeping up with it.
You have the most popular recording artist as measured by digital sales as Rihanna. And I'm thinking, there's no way. How is this not Taylor Swift? How is it not Beyonce? You know?
I was really surprised by that one, too, I have to say. But she was all over the place last year, too, despite the fact that her album is still, you know, we're all still waiting for it.
Yeah, well, exactly. And then you have the most pirated movie as being Interstellar.
Interstellar.
I haven't seen it. Maybe I should have pirated it like everybody else. But
you would have been in good company, I guess.
Again, that strikes me as just an odd choice. There were so many more popular movies that
Maybe it was in that sweet spot between don't want to pay to rent it and don't want to pay for the ticket at the theater either.
Don't want to wait for it to get to HBO.
Exactly,
okay.
I guess.
Interesting. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the news. The #1 story is sort of this complex of ISIS, the crisis in Syria, the resulting flood of migrants.
Yes, so it's all of those issues mixing together, sort of percolating, and actually the crisis in Syria and the issues with ISIS have been in our top for the last couple of years. Certainly that's a developing issue, something that's continuing to be updated. Like we said before, 1 million migrants and refugees reached Europe in 2015 alone, but 11 to 12 million Syrians have been displaced by the conflict, and that's just an enormous number. Many of those are in neighboring countries or within Syria and Iraq itself. It's a hard thing to wrap your head around.
Well, how in the digital age do you even measure, say, the number of stories? In the old days, you did what was called content analysis. You would just literally measure the length of newspaper columns and, you know, add them all up and make a guesstimate. But you're doing something different now, I imagine.
We're doing something different, yes. This is more of an editorial judgment. So we're looking at the stories that had a huge impact in 2015, but also things that we think are going to be staying in the news, continuing to have an impact on the entire world in 2016 and in years to come.
You ranked fairly high some of the stories about police killings and the protests that came about by Black Lives Matter.
Absolutely, and that was, you know, a closer to home issue certainly for Americans this year. But, you know, Walter Scott, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland. These are not just hashtags. These are, emblems of a larger movement and a larger issue that people were talking about in 2015.
And do you have any sense of whether or not people in government rely on this stuff? I mean, I know that there are sources like the CIA fact book and some others that are generated by government, but there's nothing as handy or as broad as the good old World Almanac.
The CIA fact book is not counting Rihanna's downloads yet, as far as I know. So I do think that it does have a place on a lot of people's desks. I know that a lot of people buy the ebook every year to have it portable, to have it on their iPad or e-reader, and it's a little lighter that way. You don't have 1,000 pages to carry around.
Sure.
So I do hope that it is a really great ready reference for just about anyone.
So what's your closing date? Because I know a lot of the data and a lot of the lists sort of end at the end of June. Is that kind of, you go to year at the midway point?
It depends on the section of the book, actually, because some pages print earlier than others, believe it or not. So we actually close the entire book in early November, usually around election time. We try to get the election in there, and also, of course, the World Series results.
So next year, of course, there'll be
plenty of election news, and we're already following it. We still have 11 months to go. Over a month until the first primary, but we've been on top of it all year long.
So you're just like people in my line of work, you're following, knowing that out of the 14 odd candidates who are running for the Republican, I guess 13 now, one dropped out or about to drop out. You're following all of it, knowing that most of it is going to end up on the cutting room floor.
That's right, and actually we have a great election feature in this year's edition that talks about where the race was at the end of 2015, and also looks at some of those fundraising and super PAC numbers that are a little bit less predictive this year, it seems like, than they have been in years past. But it's interesting information for sure. Okay,
thank you very much. The World Almanac and Book of Facts for 2016 is available. You can also get it online. What's the website?
You can go to worldalmanac.com or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
That'll do it.